Hi there, this week we are going to be focusing on poetry and the different elements of poetry. But before we talk about the elements of poetry, what is poetry? Do you know? If not, that's okay. We're about to cover it with this little poster right here. So poetry, it can be about anything. It can rhyme. For example, hat, cat, bat, mat, that is rhyming. Expresses our feelings and emotions. Maybe it's a poem about happiness or excitement, or maybe it's a poem about if you're sad. Poems can be silly or serious. They can have different shapes. So there's types of poems that have, they're called shape poems. So it can be in the shape of a tree, for example, and in the poem it can talk all about the different things of a tree. It can be a short poem, or it can be a very long poem. It's not always in complete sentences, so sometimes you'll see a poem and it'll have a period at the end, meaning it's in a complete sentence. And sometimes it won't have a period at the end, meaning it's not in a complete sentence. Sometimes poems have titles. For example, this poem, I'm a Little Penguin, this has a title, but sometimes they don't have titles. There are many different types of poems. So this week we're focusing on sensory poems, and we're focusing on alliteration poems and rhyming poems and poems that have repetition, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about our elements of poetry, okay? Try to get out of the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with this, this little poster. Rhyme. Say that word with me. Rhyme. So in poems, sometimes you'll have poems that have rhyming words, or it'll keep repeating, or alliteration. We'll talk a little bit more about alliteration today. Sometimes they'll have describing words like your senses or rhythm. Okay, so let's talk about rhyme. Say that with me. Rhyme. Good job. Words that end with the same sound or sounds. For example, cat and sat both end with the same sound, at. Okay. Repetition. Go ahead and say that with me. Repetition. Good job. The same words or lines are said over and over and over and over and over again. For example, right here, this bigger text is an example of repetition. I kept saying the words over and over and over again. Our next element of poetry is rhythm. This is something we've talked about in the past, and this is something that you talked about in music class. Say that with me. Rhythm. Good job. The words in a poem have a beat when you read them, like music. So whenever we read Pete the Cat and his 4 groovy buttons, we were snapping along with him or clapping along with the beat, okay? Alliteration. Words near each other start with the same sound or sounds. For example, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. What is the same letter and sound we keep hearing over again? The letter P. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. Describing words. Words tell how things look, sound, feel, smell, or taste. They help you picture what the poet sees in his or her mind. So here's some example. Okay, so I just wanted to go ahead and go over what poetry is. Remember, it can be about anything. And I wanted to go over the different elements of poetry. So rhyme, repetition, rhythm, alliteration, and describing words. So we'll go ahead and go over these a little bit more each day this week.